The legend of Burnett's Mound, created by the Native American Potawatomi tribe, proved to be incorrect on June 8th of 1966. 1966 was a very busy year. There were many elections going on, including elections for the 37th President, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. The country remained divided on the issue of segregation. As a result of Brown versus Board of Education, which ended segregation in schools, Plessy versus Ferguson was overturned by the Supreme Court, which ruled that segregation in schools was, quote, unconstitutional. During the week of June 5, 1966, an outbreak of tornadoes had been happening in what is known as Tornado Alley, which includes the states of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and eastern Colorado. There were many tornadoes that had been happening in the outbreak of June 2nd to June 12th. The most damaging one was the F5 tornado on June 8th of 1966. From 7:03 p.m. to 7:29 p.m., something left a stain on Topeka that will never be removed from people's memories. The Topeka tornado on June 8th of 1966 was not just a tragedy, but essentially a wake-up call for the entire United States. This tornado impacted us all, and we could now all see that we needed to work together. The tornado was an F5 tornado. This meant that the wind speeds reached an estimated 250 miles per hour. Wind damage was very severe, causing the entire campus of Washburn University to almost be completely torn apart. A severe thunderstorm was expected that night. At 4 p.m., a tornado watch was issued, which meant that conditions were favorable for a tornado to form. At 7 p.m., just west of Auburn, a funnel began to form. Immediately, notifications were sent out for people to take cover, and sirens were sounded. Only several minutes later, the tornado touched down and began its 22-mile-long path journey. The tornado was moving at 35 miles per hour, and its width ranged anywhere from a quarter-mile wide, at some points reaching up to a half-mile wide. For the first half of its journey, it was only in neighborhoods and places outside of the capital of Kansas, Topeka. The damage in southwest Topeka was still severe, but not as many lives were lost due to the great plans for tornado watches and warnings. Then it hit Burnett's Mound. The great Indian legend that Burnett's Mound would protect the city from all tornadoes by cutting off the end of the tornado and then not letting it enter the city proved not to be the case. At this point in time, the most famous words were spoken by Bill Curtis. These words were, "Wherever you are, for God's sake, take cover." These words are still aired on television today to remember the great words spoken by this man. Shortly after those famous words were spoken, the tornado entered Topeka. It first went through downtown Topeka. Its next victim was the campus of Washburn University. This campus was totally destroyed, as was the rest of downtown Topeka. An estimated 820 homes were destroyed, and around 3,000 homes were damaged, as well as buildings and businesses. This damage was caused by flying wind and debris, due to the fact that at some points its winds reached an estimated 300 miles per hour during its journey through downtown Topeka. Now that the tornado had lifted and was gone, people now needed to deal with the serious damage. During its journey that consisted of 22 miles, it had caused an estimated $250 million worth of damage, and had unfortunately caused 16 deaths as well as 550 injuries. All of these terrible things were done in 26 minutes and would never be forgotten. The tornado had left a major impact on not just Topeka, but on the entire country. This was a wake-up call for all of us that we needed to work together. The damage that was caused by the tornado was quite severe. There was damage done to the Capitol building dome due to flying debris, and most power lines and poles were damaged and destroyed. Washburn University was also completely torn to shreds. Due to the fact that the repairs took so long, mobile homes were needed for the following fall for the starting semester of college classes. All of this damage had a price to pay, and that price was $250 million back in 1966. But now, that would be $1.8 billion in damage, and it continues to be the third most costly tornado to ever hit the United States. The damage that was done to the Capitol building was not the most severe part of the town that was damaged. The only damage done to that particular building and the rest of downtown Topeka was mainly on the outside. All of this damage was either caused from flying debris or the massively destructive winds. Most of the suburban areas experienced damage to power poles and their own homes. Power poles were almost all knocked over, which left the entire area without electricity, and that would include heating, cooling, as well as lighting and refrigerating. Most people still had gas stoves back then though, so cooking was not a huge issue. The houses of Topeka were what caused the most damage in cost and damage to people themselves. Around 3,000 of these houses were damaged, and 820 of them were destroyed. Damage to these homes included windows and roofs. Some houses even completely collapsed, which caused anybody who was taking cover in their house to now be completely buried in it. Washburn University received the most damage out of all areas. The entire campus was destroyed, and the cost of it was about half of the cost of the entire damage total, so about $125 million, or today, $950 million. This entire community of buildings now had to completely be replaced. This tornado happened in the middle of the summer, as well as in the middle of summer college classes. This meant that there were students that needed to go to an alternate building to continue these classes. The repairs did take so long, though, that by the time the fall semester did roll around, most classes took place in either the new buildings that were finished, but because not all of them were, many classes took place in alternate classrooms or mobile homes. Damage done to families was very devastating. Even though only 16 people were killed, many loved ones and friends were impacted by their death. Most people had already gone through tragic hardships like the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, and now this left another mark on them. Due to all of the damage, though, many bodies were not easy to find. Not all were recovered because the damage had buried them or they were destroyed. Many outside organizations and people heard about the magnitude of this tragedy and sent in donations. Others that had heard of this tragedy came in to help rebuild this community that had just been destroyed. A former Topeka mayor, Chuck Wright, who is now involved with the president, was helping out too. He was able to get Washburn University alternate classrooms or areas for their summer classes, due to the fact that the entire campus was destroyed. He was out directing traffic and would give the devastated people of Topeka whatever they needed. All of his actions led to him becoming a local leader, and he was now known as the man in charge. This inspired many others to help too. People from other cities in Kansas were coming in to help rebuild the areas that were damaged by this tornado. Many actions were taken to improve and reform the system and protocol for tornadoes. Many buildings were now receiving a basement or an underground shelter for people to take cover in. The watches and warnings were being sent out more carefully and cautiously. The radar had been developed in 1935, but many improvements still needed to be made. Many of these things were not just done by the area that was hit by the tornado, but also the surrounding areas, because they saw how ugly tornadoes can really be. The devastation caused by the Topeka tornado of 1966 led to the reform of emergency planning and procedures to prevent a tragedy of this magnitude occurring again. In the aftermath of the disaster, the previously segregated community came together to rebuild.